All right, well, it is time to get going. We'll be continuing on the series, looking at some different archaeological type things. We've been going through just doing, for the past little bit, just kind of surveys of some archaeological biblical sites. Today is going to be a lot of survey for Jerusalem. Jerusalem, obviously, is a super big city, like the biggest city in the area, except for probably Tel Aviv. But obviously, tons and tons of historically significant stuff in Jerusalem. I think we'll see how this goes, but I think what we're going to do today, we're going to primarily just do kind of some survey stuff about Jerusalem, and I have lots of pictures to show. I think next week we're going to try and do some archaeological stuff that has been found in Jerusalem. And then that won't take all of our time, so we'll maybe focus on like the Dead Sea Scrolls for at least probably the other half, maybe then some other stuff, depending on how much we got there. But Jerusalem's a really interesting city, really big city. It's where this past time we were headquartered in Jerusalem, stayed in a hotel there every night, and so we got to go do the Jerusalem nightlife, which is really kind of interesting. Jerusalem in the day is a little bit different than Jerusalem at night, and so it was very cool. But lots of pictures. I think obviously we are all probably pretty familiar with Jerusalem just from reading the Bible. It comes up all the time. We might not know all the details, and you may not have a very good mental map of Jerusalem. We might try and fix that here in just a second, at least a little bit. But we're all probably pretty familiar with Jerusalem, at least in its significance in the Bible. It's obviously the city of David, obviously where the temple is. It's where Jesus does a lot of his ministry. Ultimately, it's where Jesus is going to die and be resurrected, and where the church begins. And so Jerusalem is a very, very important city. So let's just get into it, and let's look at some geographic stuff and some history here of Jerusalem. So in Genesis 14, somebody, if you want to turn your Bibles here, let's read these verses here. This is possibly the first mention of Jerusalem, although this one's pretty debated, whether this is actually a reference to Jerusalem or not. But as Abraham goes about his wanderings, he runs into a very interesting fella by the name of Melchizedek. What does the name Melchizedek mean, by the way? Melchizedek means king of righteousness. In Hebrew, Melech is king, and Sadiq is righteousness. And so in Genesis 14, verse 17, and then 18, after his return from the defeat of the that's a hard word, Kedorlaomer, and the kings who were with him, the king of Sodom went out to meet him at the valley of Shaveh, that is the king's valley, and Melchizedek, king of Salem, brought out bread and wine. He was the priest of God Most High, and then he blesses Abraham. Abraham pays homage to him. It's a very interesting encounter, but the reference king of Salem, some have associated with Jerusalem. Jerusalem is definitely in the area that Sodom and Gomorrah and those cities that were in that whole area were in. They're all pretty nearby, and so it seems like Melchizedek was probably the king of Jerusalem, Salem. That word, there's a lot of debate about what does it actually mean. Probably means something like city of peace. Shalom is obviously peace in Hebrew. If you know any Hebrew words, you probably know shalom. That one's pretty common. But maybe a reference to Jerusalem, maybe not. Some time goes by. Obviously, Abraham does his wandering, has his kids, and then Jacob goes to Egypt, and you have the Egyptian conquest. Oh, and Israel comes back into the Promised Land. Salem is no longer a righteous city, if that is in fact a reference to Jerusalem. The city of Jerusalem is under Canaanite control, and it will be for a very long time. It's until David comes around. So flip over to 2 Samuel. David is the one who actually conquers Jerusalem from the Canaanites. So in 2 Samuel chapter 5, you have this, and this is kind of this is an action story, if there's going to be an action story. 2 Samuel 5, previous to Jerusalem, Saul and then David ruled over the tribes in Hebron. Hebron is a pretty southern city there in Jerusalem. But then, verse 6, the king and his men went to Jerusalem against the Jebusites, the inhabitants of the land, who said to David, "You will not come in here, but the blind and the lame will ward you off," thinking, "David cannot come in here." Nevertheless, David took the stronghold of Zion, that is, the city of David. And David said on that day, "Whoever would strike the Jebusites, let him get up the water shaft to attack the lame and the blind, who are hated by David's soul. Therefore it is said, the blind and the lame shall not come into the house." And David lived in the stronghold in the city of David. David built the city all around, all around from the Millo inward. And David became greater and greater, and the Lord, the God of hosts, was with him. And so David conquers the city. The city has, it's very well positioned. Obviously, Mount Zion is a pretty large hill. This is also, well, I'll get to this in a second, but David conquers by gaining kind of secret entry into the city. There's some tunnels underneath, some water tunnels. And so David crawls through these tunnels and enters into the city and takes the city from like the inside, which is kind of a crazy action scene if you think about what all that would entail. What's really interesting, we have found that tunnel. And you can go through it. And so I have not gone through it, but we'll talk about that more in just a second. Then Jerusalem is positioned on Mount Moriah, which is also known as Mount Zion. And this is a really important location. It's the location where Abraham is told to sacrifice Isaac. And Abraham takes him up, and we know that God provides, and he was going to go through with it, but he ended up not having to actually kill his son. But on that same location then, that's where Solomon decides to build the temple. And so look at 2 Chronicles chapter 3, verse 1. Then Solomon began to build the house of the Lord in Jerusalem on Mount Moriah, where the Lord had appeared to David his father, at the place David had appointed, on the threshing floor of Ornan the Jebusite. And he began to build in the 2nd month of the 4th year of his reign, and goes on to give all the measurements. And so on Mount Moriah, where Abraham was going to sacrifice Isaac, Solomon then builds the temple, which is a really significant place. And it's still very significant today, obviously. So kind of just to picture the city. The city has changed a lot over time. You have the ancient city, like the city of David city. Then, as people grow and as the kingdom grows, the city needs to grow too. And so you have like several different sets of walls that are built up, and it can be kind of confusing. And so sometimes the city of David's bigger than other times, and so it can be a little bit confusing. But the general boundaries of Jerusalem, today the city is just sprawling, like it's a huge, huge city. There's obviously the old city, but then there's, it's a very modern city too. But the northern kind of boundary of it is called the Hill of Bezetha, which is not a term that shows up in the Bible, but it's just kind of a term that's, been out there. I know Josephus, the Jewish historian, talks about it and all that. But you got some mountain range up top. It's in Judea, the hill country, very, very hilly, and, just rolling hills, lots of valleys and all of that. You have the Hinnom Valley on the east. And so if you're on, the main city, Jerusalem, you go east, you go down into the Hinnom Valley, the valley of Gehenna. Gehenna and Hinnom are the same word there. And then you go up from that into the Mount of Olives, where Jesus, you have the Garden of Gethsemane on the Mount of Olives. Jesus looks into Jerusalem and he, mourns, laments over Jerusalem. That's the eastern side of I've got a picture to show you, so you don't have to fret. And then you have on the south and the western border, you had the Kidron Valley, and that is obviously mentioned as well. So just kind of your geography here. That's map of Israel. It's right there. It's real close to Jericho, where we looked at last time, in that Judean hill country. Very arid, lots of hills, lots of rocks, all that kind of stuff. This is just kind of a map of Jesus' day, what it kind of would have, what the boundaries would have been like. So you got like the Kidron Valley here, the Pool of Siloam would be right there. You have different quarters, like you got the rich people where they live, you got where the poor people live, and all that kind of stuff. The lower city is the older part, like this is the older part. Herod's palace is obviously pretty large, and that would be new because Herod is pretty close to the time of Jesus, just a little bit before. Then you have the Temple Mount, and it's huge, and it's expanded by Herod. So this is like probably what the Temple Mount would have been like pre-Herod. And then Herod just makes the whole thing, like doubles it in size. It's an enormous complex. At the time, and I guess still probably today, it's the largest temple in the world complex. And so even like the Romans saw it and were like, wow, that's huge, that's incredible. And then you have, during the Maccabean period and all of that predates, when Rome comes in, you get the Antonia fortress, which is where all these Roman guards would have been stationed. Notice where it is, right? It's a really tall tower that overlooks everything that happens in the temple. And so you might imagine the Jews don't like being spied on, right? And so lots of hostilities there. Lots of stuff. You got all these different gates that are mentioned in the Bible. Probably the most notable is like the Beautiful Gate right here, all that kind of stuff. Here's a old map of Jerusalem, and it is hard to find a good map that just showed everything I wanted to show. This is pretty old, but some interesting things. Can you see my mouse? Obviously, you go east, you got the Brook of Kidron, here's the Mount of Olives. And so right around here is Gethsemane at the base of the Mount of Olives near the brook. And you make your way up around here to Bethphage. This is where Jesus would have been on top of the mountain looking down at Jerusalem. The Temple Mount's like right here. You would see all that. And then you go just a little bit further and you're in Bethany, right? Who lives in Bethany? What happens in Bethany? A certain person dies, right? It's where Lazarus lives. And this whole path, if you were just to go as like the bird flies, it's like 2 miles maybe a mile or something like that. But, in walking distance, it's like about 4 miles. And so even up until very recently, this is a major roadway, that road from Jerusalem down through Bethany. If you're to go to Jericho, which Jericho is a major city, Jesus makes that path. He makes that trip from Jerusalem down to Jericho. He would have 100% have gone through that road. It's like the major roadway from the east. So all of that's really, really important. Some other important things, obviously the pools here, the Canaanite tunnel and King Hezekiah's tunnel are right around here. The reason they're not on this map is because they weren't discovered when this map was created. This map was like 1880s, but they were discovered after that. And so there's some other slight inaccuracy type things on this map just because we've discovered things. The very likely site of David's tomb is right around here, which is kind of interesting. Then you go over on this side, you have Mount Calvary or Golgotha, which is a really interesting place. We'll look at a lot of pictures here. And so obviously that's where Jesus would have been crucified, right outside city walls. Why wouldn't you want to crucify him in the city? Well, a lot of reasons, right? It's unclean. You don't want to. You got Passover coming up. You take him outside to kill him, right? But this is a major, roadway too. And so you're coming down those roads. You look over to your right, And it's not very far. Like this map might seem like it's a big city. It is not a big city. These are just a few miles here represented in this map, like the whole span of it. But you look over on a high place and you see all these crucified people. What are you not going to be doing when you come into town? Causing trouble, because that's going to be you. And so they put you on the high place outside of town, and that's where you'd be crucified. And then just, it's spitting distance is right up here, the tomb, the garden tomb, that would be here. And I'll have some pictures to show you in a minute. The garden tomb was a place that was originally a quarry from Solomon's day. And so Solomon has all these building constructions. You got to pull rock from somewhere. And so this area was a quarry. And it became beautified because you have all the rich people that are living up in this new northern quarter, and they look out their gates. They don't want to see a big rock quarry. So what do? You beautify it. And that's one of the projects that probably Herod embarked on. And so it is spitting distance from Calvary to where Jesus would have been buried. We'll look at some of these things here. Today, all of that whole area is one giant complex, the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. You may have heard of that or seen pictures of it. I'll show you a bunch of pictures here in a minute. This is a picture of the Canaanite tunnel. I didn't get to go through it, so I just ripped one off the internet. But look at that. Like, can you imagine David and his guys in a full loadout? I don't know what all that would have looked like, but sneaking through here by lantern light, like one of those little tiny lanterns, ready to go kill some guys. Crazy. These little tunnels. It is really narrow. We'll look more at it next week, the Hezekiah's tunnel. But this is Jerusalem from Mount of Olives. So you're on the east side looking west into Jerusalem. And the temple complex is enormous, right? So starting here is the temple. Those are the southern steps where like Acts 2 would have happened, right there at the southern steps. But the temple complex goes from here all the way like here. That's huge. It's enormous. And the Dome of the Rock right here was positioned in that spot probably because that's where the Holy of Holies was. That's the pinnacle of Mount Zion in that spot. It looks very different because it's been built up and it's hard to see, what the natural geography would have been like. But there's a rock inside. It's called Dome of the Rock. There's a rock in the very inside of it where is possibly the site where Abraham would have sacrificed Isaac, where the Holy of Holies was, and where the Muslims say Muhammad, well, it is a story. Muhammad flew here on a horse, and then he ascended into heaven, and he argued with God about how many prayers they have to do in a day. And then he and Moses teamed up, and they haggled with God and got it down to like the 5 prayers that they do a day. But they say that's where that happened. So interesting stuff. But lots of things to see here. These walls are not the original right here. These have been built up over different times. They might be. Some of it might be. I don't know. It's hard to say because there's been so many generations of building and all that kind of stuff. Right here, you might see like a double gate here. That would be, it's either here or right here. I have a hard time remembering. The Beautiful Gate, one of those is where that would be. It's sealed up now. So I think it's this one. They call it the Golden Gate, and they sealed it up because to make the Jews mad. So a lot of things are about making the Jews mad. All of these are Muslim tombs, and they sealed up the gate because what do the Jews believe is going to happen? The Messiah is going to come from the east, from the Mount of Olives. It's what the prophets prophesy about. And so they put all these corpses here because it'll make him unclean when he comes into the temple. And that's what, so. Yeah, they're like little mausoleum type things. And so you can't walk through, get in the city without going through a graveyard, which would make you unclean. So lots of tensions here. But you can see like the old quarter, and then there's skyscrapers in the background, right? Like it's very much a modern city. But that's the Valley of Gehenna, or Hinnom, right there. Right here is the Garden of Gethsemane. And so it's all real close. Everything's just smacked real close to each other. If you have questions, feel free to ask as we go. Here's Claire, sitting on a camel. So, yeah.
Having the time of her life.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep. This is so there's a huge museum that's right outside outskirts of Jerusalem called the Shrine of the Book. It's where all the Dead Sea Scrolls are housed. It's a huge museum. But they have a scale model of what Jerusalem would have been like in the first century. And so obviously it's not to scale because that would be a whole city. But this is all like what you would expect and the size of things and how they would be. It's a huge temple. Like everywhere you look, that is just, in your face, right? And of course, it's like covered in gold and silver. It would be gleaming, and like, sun hits it, everybody's blind. You can't go anywhere without being able to see it, basically. And so it's just it dominates everything here. And you got all these different quarters. This is like the City of David quarter, like the old part. You got the nice, like where the aristocracy would be kind of up here in like the more northern part. And you got like the officials here. You got the Antonia Fortress here with these towers that go up so they can look down and to see everything that's happening here in the temple complex. And that makes the Jews really mad. And there's stories of them like building up a wall right here to cover it. And so they built up another wall to make the tower a little higher and like, petty kind of stuff. But just give you a kind of rough model idea of what it would have looked like back in the day. This is the same model, just a little bit better view of it, of what the temple complex would have looked like back in the first century after Herod does his building. It's huge, right? That's enormous. And, lots of courts to do business and teaching and, all these different courts right there, obviously for worship. You got the different things that you read about in like the different courts of the Gentiles, court of the women, all that kind of stuff. Obviously there in the very center of that is the Holy of Holies, where presumably the Ark of the Covenant would be, and all of that sort of thing. But just a massive structure, and you couldn't go anywhere without seeing this. It would just dominate everything. Any thoughts on any of that?
Was it outside everything?
Yeah. Yeah.
I didn't picture that. I pictured, picture.
Yeah, no. Yeah, it's all open air, right? Yeah. So this is the Garden of Gethsemane. I didn't have very many pictures. It's very small. It's hard to tell what it would have been like back in the day. But those are enormous olive trees. Olive trees never stop growing, and they can live almost indefinitely. Those trees, they say, are probably over 1,000 years old. And they said they're probably the direct descendants of the ones that would have been, there back in the day. Yeah.
It gets so old, there's a ton of Greek mythology about the immortality of olive trees that Athenia gave them and all
Yeah.
that stuff.
Yeah.
And olive trees, I could be wrong, don't quote me, but they only produce fruit and olives on new branches. So you don't
Yeah.
see very many old olive trees and groves anymore because they're massive, take up a bunch of resources, and they don't put out more fruit than the brand new little ones.
Yeah. Yeah. But those are super old. Olive trees are really pretty. They're silvery, like you can see that. But yeah, if not, those are almost very likely to be at least the descendants of the olive trees that would have been there a long time ago. I don't quite know how tree reproduction works, but I'm just saying what I was told. So There's a big church right next to it that's really pretty, really interesting church. So the Temple Mount, though. So specifically, the temple complex. It was originally built by Solomon in 957 BC, destroyed by the Babylonians in 586 BC. So the original temple stood for quite a while, not too terribly long, just 400 years-ish or so. Then it obviously was destroyed by the Babylonians, and 70 years later, Zerubbabel, when he comes around, he starts working on it, and the temple is reconstructed 516 BC, which is commonly, if you look at literature stuff, you see the Second Temple period. That's a really common phrase you'll see, and it begins there in 516 and goes up till AD 70. So the temple of Zerubbabel was around for quite a while, but it was ugly in comparison to Solomon's temple. And so what you read about is when he constructs it, all the people see it and they weep, because the old people weep because they remember what it was in Solomon's day back when they were kids, and it's just a shadow of its former glory. And so what does the prophet tell them? I think it's, is it Haggai? I think. What's he tell them? It's like, guys, get over yourselves. Quit weeping for it, because the glory of this temple will be greater than the former temple. And obviously that's because this is the temple that Jesus is going to go into. But King Herod the Great, he is going to be just a prolific builder. It is insane the things that King Herod accomplishes in his life. He builds like castles all over the place, like fortresses all over the place. He builds Caesarea Maritima, just this enormous port. He builds Herodium, amazing city, and he does a lot of construction on the temple. And so he doubles the size of the temple complex and embarks on this big beautification project and all this kind of stuff. Just massive amounts of money, massive amounts of wealth. And so when Jesus is talking to the people, and he talks about, I'm going to tear down these walls, what do they say? You would tear down these walls? It took us what? It took us 40 years to get these, to get all this up. And so it's definitely a slow process, but King Herod accomplishes a lot, and it's finished, I think what I saw was it was finished after, and like the final things were finished in like the 60s AD, just in time to be destroyed. Because in AD 70, the Romans come in, and the Romans lay siege to Jerusalem, and it is completely razed. And so it is just totally and utterly destroyed by soon to be Emperor Vespasian and Titus. And they just obliterate it. They haul off all the goods. As a result from this, they build the Great Colosseum in Rome, which is also called the Colosseum of Titus, and lots of interesting things here. But 130 AD, Emperor Hadrian sees this big old temple complex that's sitting there. It's been leveled. The Romans pushed all the blocks just off the base, and so you got this big old empty base here, Temple Mount, and tons of rubble all around. He orders the construction of a temple to Jupiter. And in 130, he is going to, Rome becomes a colony after it is conquered in AD 70. Some soldiers just take up permanent residence here. It becomes an official Roman city, and it's named Aeolus Capitolina or something like that. And he builds a giant, massive statue to Jupiter right where the temple was, as a slap in the face to the Jews. And so it had two enormous statues to Jupiter, which is obviously a big offense. And part of their cleansing worship practices, they sacrifice pigs. And so obviously very, very offensive, lots of problems here. It's eventually destroyed by, I think, Constantine in the 300s. Then in 610, a lot of history happens. there's a big war between the Christian Byzantines and the Sassanid Empire. Well, it ends up the Christians lose, the Byzantine Empire loses. And in 637, Caliph Umar takes the city, and in 691, the Dome of the Rock is built. And then after the Dome of the Rock is built, the Al-Aqsa Mosque is built in 715. And this is a really significant site for Muslims. So, I didn't go up on the Temple Mount this last time, but I went in 2019 when Claire and I went. This is the Dome of the Rock. It is enormous and beautiful, and it's real gold. It was gold plated in 1917, so the gold is a pretty recent feature. But that is an old building there, and all of the scribbles right there that you see is Arabic writing all over the top of it. And it's really interesting, and I won't get into all of it. I have gone on a weird deep dive into Islam this past week. But it's anti-Christian writings, what's on the top of it. And it says, there's a passage that says something like, I'm going to misquote it, but something like, God is one and God has no son, is part of the writings. And so it's anti-Christian writings written up on the top of that. And that is over the spot where supposedly, probably, the Holy of Holies was, where Abraham would have sacrificed Isaac and all of that. Just another big city. When we go up there, they have very strict dress code. And so you cannot show basically any skin. And there was a girl in our group who was just, it was not anything immodest, but she had like short sleeves. And we got up there and she got like stopped by a couple of Muslim guys. And they're like, hey, you with the arms, cover up, and like with guns. And so we're like, Hannah, put on this shawl immediately. So that was fun. You're not allowed to touch up there. And so like Claire and I wanted to take a picture like this, and that was quickly shut down.
We did before though. We were bored. But everybody when we got home went, why aren't you guys touching? Why do you look like
Yeah,
that?
so there's a bunch of pictures of Claire and I like standing next to each other. It's
See one of those pictures.
yeah, I should have put them in. Yeah, but well, I don't think I put it in here. I should have. You have this isn't the mosque. It's just a shrine. The big gray domed building is the mosque, which is kind of interesting. But this is a picture of the Wailing Wall. You might have heard about that. It's the only portion of Herod the Great's retaining wall that exists. And so this is just a retaining wall, right? He expands the Temple Mount like enormously. And so if you're going to make a big expansion, you got to build big retaining walls. And this is all that exists of it. So this wall would have been there in Jesus' day. But this wasn't part of the temple proper, but it's all that exists of it. And so you have the Jews will go there and do their prayers, and it's called the Wailing Wall because they weep there for the temple that was lost. You have a men's section, you have a women's section. So Ain, no, Nisa, so no men. So is what it says. But women's section over here, men's section over there, which is kind of interesting.
Up to the wall, yes. She's asking about the gender.
Yeah, up to the wall. So like right here, you got all the women going in. The rest of it, the big part, is for the men. Yeah. Yeah. What's really interesting, so I wasn't quite sure how all this worked until today, and I really gotten deep into it. But you see this little arch that's right here? So the original roadway that would have been here in the first century is significantly below where we are right here. A lot has been built up. That's the tip of a very large arched passageway. And the structure right here would have been an arch, like a big, like above the rest of the city, highway to get up onto the temple complex, and it's been built on even after that. And you can see that kind of like the different levels of stone there. Underneath here is a synagogue that brushes up against the Temple Mount. Yeah.
If you want to pull them up, I sent you the awkward picture and also a picture of the actual box.
All right, we'll look at that after. So we don't want that on the internet forever. So this is Robinson's Arch. So this is the south western section. This is really interesting because this is part of the Wailing Wall. The Wailing Wall is just like right on the opposite side of this. Do you see this weird thing right here? That right here would have been a major gateway entrance onto the Temple Mount. And this was part of a massive staircase that Herod was building that would have like jutted out like down this way and wrapped around down this way. And so this is an artist rendering of what it would have looked like. And you can kind of see just enormous structure. And what's really interesting, obviously this was destroyed. When the temple stuff was destroyed, they just pushed all these big blocks off. And so you have tons of rubble down here that was previously up there. And for a long time, a lot of this was not excavated for a very long time. And when they started doing excavations of this, it was just, rubble with like just dirt, accumulated dirt on top of it for a very long time. And so they started doing excavations, and they're still doing excavations of this stuff. They're finding really interesting things. And we'll talk about some of those probably next week. They found, here's your little spoiler. They found signet rings. They're called bula. It's like a little clay stamp, basically, that has this insignia of King Hezekiah. They found the bula of Isaiah the prophet. They found the bula of the chief of the temple administrator. Really interesting stuff. And they're still finding things here pretty often. And there's a lot of work that's been done. It's really hard to get the permits to do this kind of stuff, though. It's really, really hard. But this would have been a massive entrance. I don't think this would have been completed in the time of Jesus. I think this part would still have been under construction. I think, from what I was reading, this staircase was completed in like AD 60 and then just promptly destroyed. So just kind of makes you sick for those guys, right? But really, really interesting. This is just the corner of the Temple Mount. Look how enormous those blocks are. I cannot fathom how they moved these things. It is unbelievable without modern technology, all that kind of stuff. Here's a guy, he's taller than me. He's probably 6'3". He was on our trip, just standing next to one of these blocks, just to give you a scale perspective of how big this is. It's enormous. And so all of these are probably about as tall as that guy. So like maybe 6 feet tall right here. But look how long the singular block goes. It goes all the way to there. Like, that's insane. And then look how thick it is. Like, just
Because we don't have that kind of
yeah,
stuff these days, and we have way more technology and equipment.
yeah. Like, I'm sure you could do that a lot more easily with today's like cranes and stuff. But like, it's insane. And a lot of this rock was quarried really far away, and so they haul it over all these hills and mountains, and it's nuts. Blocks that Herod made are all pretty identifiable because they have this inlay right there. You see that on lots of Herod's like construction projects.
So what is that, the inlay?
It's just an artist. Yeah. This is some of that rubble that was found. They found in this mess, I don't know, it was standing right off. I didn't get a picture of it. The real one's in a museum, but the replica, just laying there for like 1,000+ years, was a huge rock with a horned thing on it. And it had writing in Hebrew on it, the trumpeting rock, or something like that. And so when you go back and you read about all the way worship was conducted, they had this big platform that you'd stand up and you'd blow your trumpets from. It was the original. And so just kind of nuts. And it's just laying there for like 2,000 years. Nobody bothered to, look at it. This is the southern steps where Peter this would have been the main entrance into the temple. Super broad. There's a double gate and then there's a triple gate over on the other side. This is probably where Peter would have done the sermon at Pentecost. Right there's a little image of what it would have looked like back in the day. For a long time, people were like, well, where are you going to baptize all these people? They found all over the place mikveh, which are like these Jewish baptistries. And there's a ton right outside of this. I'll show you a picture of one in a second. But there's some more recent steps, but a lot of these old steps, those are like the first century steps. The ones that look real crumbled and old. And so somebody was sitting there hearing Peter preach, pretty crazy. This is the triple gate. This would have been like the biggest entrance into the Temple Mount, what it would have looked like. That's left over from last week's PowerPoint. Look at that guy. He's just happy to be in a baptistry. But he's in a mikveh. You have the unclean side and you have the clean side. You walk down one, you come up out the other, ritually clean. And then from that, you can go up into the Temple Mount. And so where's Peter doing all these baptisms? Probably in the mikveh, maybe that one. It'd take a while to baptize 3,000 people. So pretty interesting. We are running out of time. Church of the Holy Sepulchre, anything that we don't get to, I'll get to next week. But it was originally a quarry outside of the city, probably from Solomon. It was converted to a garden to kind of beautify it because these rich people didn't want to be looking out their window and seeing a big rock quarry. In 130, Emperor Hadrian renamed Jerusalem, and he builds a temple to Jupiter/Venus on the site of the Calvary, Golgotha, and the tomb. And he mentions specifically in his order, and we have written record of this, that there's a certain tomb, rock-cut tomb there, that he specifically instructed to be filled in. Why would you instruct that? Well, probably it's Christians from 130 that have been venerating the site, and it's the tomb that Jesus was buried in, and so he wanted to make sure to get rid of it because he's not too happy with the people. And so they build a big wall, and they just fill this entire area with dirt. And it's an enormous fill. And it would have been an enormous temple there to Jupiter. And it exists for a while. Then Constantine in 326, he converts to Christianity. He destroys the temple. And then as they destroy it, they uncover the tomb and rebuild this little thing over top of it. And then from there, the Church of the Holy Sepulchre is built. When you're there, it's very likely that it's probably the site. It's really hard to envision what it would have been like because it looks nothing today like what it would have. So this is what it looks like today. There's a massive, massive church building. Underneath it is what it would have looked like. All of that, yellow striped stuff is gone. So the hill is gone. You have the bedrock. You have where the tomb would have been, but it's not really there anymore. They just built this rotunda around it. It's really hard to envision what it would have looked like. But, the tomb was spitting distance from the cross. We'll pick up here. Yeah. There's a lot of interesting things here. Yeah. All right. We'll pick up next week.